Hey, welcome to the Road and Morale podcast. So, do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom, or outside the school gates? For the love of God, come on, really? Then, if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun, and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Rona Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share, and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, or maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on, really. So enjoy. Hi, Nic. Welcome to the Road and Morale podcast. How are you?
Really well, really well. Lovely to see you.
Oh, and you. Missed your face for sure. So for the benefit of all the wonderful listeners, I'd love to introduce you to the fabulous Nic Crisp, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for quite a few years now, and have worked with Nic previously. Nic has two fabulous daughters and lives down south in Essex. And Nic's history really has always been in kind of senior executive roles and vice president roles across sales, marketing, innovation, and with some big companies in the world of FMCG. So there's some common ground there. But Nic also does quite a lot of voluntary work. So I know you've done work with Crisis X and working with the Farleigh Hospice. So kudos to you on those things. But you've also since become the author of two books, which has prompted this podcast, and we'll talk about that later. But in your pursuit of a better work-life balance, you decided to go out on your own. How many years ago was that now?
Nearly 8.
Oh
Can
my
you believe
God.
how long ago? It's gone really quickly, but yeah, 8 years ago.
Okay, awesome. And one of the reasons why I love what Nic does now, and I wanted to talk to you, Nic, was around your pursuit of passion within teams and driving accountability and those cultures that surround it. And I think that's something very close to my heart. So when Nic launched the second book, which I do have and I have read, The Mindset of Encouragement, I found myself getting really quite emotive actually, and I could remember the times when you had the great boss, the bad boss, but then also getting really angry because I was like, why should I have felt like that? Why did I leave? And I think that's what I'd love to talk to you about today: leadership, and the good and the bad and the ugly, and also kind of further explore, if you could help my listeners understand, this teal approach. So there's different colors you talk about in the book, but
Yeah.
the teal approach to leadership, and it just really resonated with me in terms of life, parenting. Anyway, I'll shut up. So
No, don't. Where would you like to start? Where would it be most helpful to start, do
do
you
you
think?
know what? I think maybe to get it off my chest,
Yeah,
the
sounds like
leadership
it.
side.
Yeah, go on. So what was it that really triggered that for you? In it, was there anything you particularly read in the book that you thought that actually really might resonate for your listeners as well?
Yeah, I guess it was kind of over the years experiencing those leadership styles that were exceptionally destructive and controlling. Um, and, you know, I remember once in a particular organization, a guy saying to me, look, I know you have to deal with this guy. I know he's really hard to deal with and no one really can, but you can put up with him. That's your kind of character. You'll put up with him. And for a while I thought, well, yeah, I can, but actually after sort of 4 or 5 months I went, no, I don't have to. I don't want to. I don't want to be feeling like this every day. So I wanted to explore for the listeners how you deal with some of those destructive and can be quite aggressive leadership styles.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, yeah, that's a that's a really great start. And do you know what? I think it's part of our own development that we get to see and understand that for ourselves, what we love, what we don't. I mean, one of the questions I did when I first wrote, before I started writing the book, was I wrote out to loads and loads of people who I've worked with over the years, clients that I've had, and I said, tell me about the leaders you most admired. What did you love about them? And you very quickly get a picture of what great looks like. And then often what people do is start outpouring all the things that they didn't like, just like you have. They remember all the people that weren't like that. And it's like, I think part of I know I see it with the clients that I coach. I think when we start our careers, we're very driven to fit in. And if you go into most organizations that are very hierarchical and have a very clear idea about what you should be like, how you should show up, they're very focused on outcomes and goals, which is great. And there's that's delivering together individually, collectively, that's a really, really important. But very often they're structured that there's a way of being that is their way, and we need to conform. Now, where the anger sometimes comes is where we look up in the hierarchy and we see people that actually aren't doing that.
Yeah.
That's one tension. But I think the other side of it, and I just don't know whether it's just part of our own evolution. It's the natural way of things. But we kind of when we get to really understand ourselves and what we love and what we don't, and what gets the best out of us, then very often we stop thinking, well, how can I be more of what other people want me to be? And it becomes more a conversation around, well, who am I and what do I need to get the best out of myself? So,
Yeah.
and it's a very subtle switch, but it kind of means that when we then go for an interview somewhere, we're less driven to think, well, how can I say the right things that makes them want me? And
Yes.
more, actually, what do I need to ask them to find out what kind of culture they have and what their leadership philosophy is, and who is attracted to working in their organization, so I can see if that fits me.
Yeah,
And
and it's kind of seeing that interview as a two-way thing. I think we tend to go in and think it's all about them questioning us.
yes, and that mindset shifts, I think, and it's a very subtle shift, but it's a really important one. Someone I work with, actually, I do a lot of work with her. She's amazing. Her background, she's actually an accountant by background, but she's now in recruitment and consultancy. And one of the things that she said when she read my book was the thing she loved about it is actually it provides some real clarity for people to say, yeah, what kind of organization am I in?
Yeah.
And what do I really want to be in to get the best out of me? And sometimes if there's a fit and there's alignment in those things, it's amazing because you can feel it. You don't really know why, but you just know it. You fit.
I think what's exciting about like the future is that probably someone of my age and maybe older, there are more traditional type of structures and organizations. And so that very hierarchical control exists. And I think what's exciting now is that there's a massive space of businesses that are just getting it right. And I guess maybe on reflection, I probably have struggled massively because I came from a very unique organization back in those days with that crazy energy drink, and I just thought that's how businesses work. They took risks. We'd sit in our jeans in the boardroom, and I just couldn't understand why these crazy organizations were working in the way they were working, and seeing how destructive it was to teams and people. It was upsetting.
Well, yeah, I get it. And actually it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously I do know you quite well, and you're doing a role now where you get to be exactly who you are. You get to shine, and with your strengths fully on display around, you're dealing in creativity, you're in innovation, and you're free, and you're working then with people who are actually very like-minded, who want the same energy that you bring. And obviously it's interesting, you had that experience very early in your career, and you've refound it in a different way, on your own, as opposed to working within an organization. But that it is, you mentioned the teal energy earlier, and we probably ought to explain that for people.
Please do.
What that is. So I'd read a book years ago now, actually. This is written by he's an amazing consultant. His name's Frederick Laloux, and he wrote a book called Reinventing Organizations. And what he did was he took work from philosophers, people that had studied though human development over time, and then applied that understanding of how we've evolved as human beings in groups to the organizations that we've created along the way. And there's a kind of a 5-color spectrum that he's created. I think we've got a link that we might better send people if they're interested in knowing more, because
I'll add it when I put this out. I'll add it on
so
the link.
A one-pager which gives you a kind of a summary of those things. But basically, the most evolved organizational kind of paradigm, way of thinking, if you like, way of connecting, is what he calls teal, and it's where you have an organization, a group of people that come together in a way that's very free. So there's absolutely no hierarchy. You just have a collection of networks and groups who are all working for the same purpose.
Yeah.
But everything that we've kind of come to assume about how organizations work, i.e., it's very fixed. You've got one person that sits at the very, very top with 8 direct reports, and another layer under them and another layer under them, a bit like an army. But that's just inherently very fixed. Teal organizations just do away with that entirely. The other thing which I loved about one of the big signals of those types of organizations is that anyone who's not frontline and in a role which is really designed to support those in the front line to do the very best they can for the end user, for the end customer, patient, whoever it is that you're working with, all of those types of support functions, and that would include specialists like finance or IT or HR. These individuals are there to provide their expertise, which is hugely valued, but they actually don't have any say in decision making. All the decisions are made by those in commercial and operational roles. So their expertise must be heard and is always valued, but they don't have an ultimate say in what happens. And that's really important, actually, in terms of the way organizations can end up being driven, i.e. by cost. Or by process. Sometimes it's because the balance of power is kind of gone the wrong way.
Can I just touch on something there, because this was another, and we will come back to the teal, I think, because actually subconsciously it was kind of my brand colour that I ended up choosing. But on the cost element, this was something that also triggered me in the book, and I can't remember what page it was. Oh, okay, you can see here I've actually written just bloody fire people. But I think what I meant by that, of course, we need to help guide, lead and train our people. But one of the things that I saw repeated across bigger organizations was this continuous restructuring every so often. And it was an excuse to either, let's just get rid of the people that we don't want in here, because they haven't just dealt with it properly and professionally throughout the year or the years. And that used to really get on my nerves when the teams are demotivated. They can see someone's really not making an effort, they're ticking a box, they're liked by somebody, and we don't do anything about it. Why does that happen so much?
Brilliant question. I mean, usually it's an avoidance of some sort, because it's actually where I start in the book in terms of what's the problem you're actually trying to solve. And sometimes there's a really, really important need to restructure. There's a lot of organisations restructuring right now because the bottom has fallen out of their marketplace. They can't sustain themselves unless they let some people go.
Yeah.
There's a genuine purpose there around survival, and they need to get lean in order to make sure they've got some sort of organisation to move forward, which makes total sense. But you're right, in terms of purpose, sometimes people are using restructures as a means of avoiding doing something that's actually about the people, the quality of the people, the behaviours of the people. And obviously, if you end up putting a solution in place that isn't really addressing the issue that you've got, you'll end up spending a huge amount of money. And as you say, the other costs will be felt in terms of demotivation and apathy, really, because people will just kind of check out and go, or
what if he can do it or she can do it or leave,
or they'll leave. Yeah, and often when you are in organisations that are continually restructuring like that, often it's the stars that will go first because they know they can, and they know that they'll get something great elsewhere. And the people who are fearful of change or fearful of moving will be the ones that hold back and hang in.
Yeah.
Which wasn't necessarily loyalty is a great thing, but it might not necessarily be the people that are going to innovate and drive you forwards, which is what you need when you come out of a restructure.
Yeah.
So why do people do it? It's a very, very good question. It all comes down to purpose, but really, and usually they've jumped to a solution, but not one that addresses the issue.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That was probably more just a bit of therapy for me, just to get it off my get it off my chest. And I'm not naive enough to think I could have been one of those people that wasn't right for the role, and maybe not behaviourally, but it might have been my ability, and vice versa. But just having the balls to say, I felt like it always came down to the individual to go, this isn't working, is it? And that's a really scary place to be, to put your hand up and go, either culturally this isn't right for me, behaviourally, or I'm not performing, and make that decision to leave. It's scary.
It is. The interesting thing about teal organisations as well, though, is that that one of the principles of teal is that they self-manage. So actually the decision is, any decision about who joins the team and who might need to leave the team is done by the team. It's not done by somebody who's a little bit more remote. And I don't know, your listeners might have had that experience. I know I've seen it, where people are in a room discussing people that sit maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 layers below them, making decisions about talent. And actually, it's usually your peers who know you the best, because they see you as you are, more often too. And so our peers are often, I say, our biggest assets. They can be our most reliable sources of criticism,
knowledge,
of what our blind spots are. And when you can allow a team to really confidently give each other feedback, that's where they make the most progress, where it's peer-to-peer feedback rather than just being relied on somebody in a hierarchy.
So when it comes to kind of things like, I'm just trying to think again, reflect on maybe how I could have dealt with things differently or whatever. If you've got, you're in a place where the leader is quite controlling or doesn't act in the best intentions and is impacting your life, what's the best way of going about trying to deal with that?
Well, this ultimately comes down to use of power, really, and understanding the power that you've got. So one of the first base really is knowing that you can choose where you stay, what you say, what you do, how you show up, but the very best you can do for someone else is influence them. So the first thing is to remember you can't really change anybody.
Yeah.
You might be able to say something that might influence their behaviour, but remembering that you don't really have that power is actually quite important. So you've got a choice whether you want to stay or not. That's the first thing. And if you do choose to stay, you've got to choose whether you say something, choice to say something, which
Yeah.
might have an influence over somebody else. And obviously, as a first step, that's always the most important, is to give feedback. Say what you think, say how you feel, say it honestly, say it as calmly as you can muster, but say it.
Because I think what can happen is, well, certainly for me, and I don't mind admitting it, I either get to the point where I feel I either don't have the confidence to say it, or the impact of if I say something will be too great, that it boils and boils and boils away, or I get super emotive and just bawl my eyes out. And so it's kind of that, I guess I have a 3-strike rule. It's put up and shut up, try and change it, or leave. And I try and live by that, but that control and feeling of power above can often decide how you act and feel. And it's a brave move to say something that that person doesn't want to hear, even in a calm way, and know that there won't be repercussions.
I know, but that's another thing that I did, when I did my research for the book, is I asked people, what were the things that, what feedback did they themselves get that they never ever forgot? And I'm sure people listening to this will have something that they can think, oh my God, yeah, somebody said that to me and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I know I've had that. I wrote about that. You might have as well, Rena. Somebody just gives you some feedback and you go, oh my God, I've never ever seen it that way, or I just didn't realize that was what I was doing. And so you have to always have that humility that, we've all got amazing strengths, we've all got weaknesses, we've all got blind spots. So to think that somebody, just because they're in a position that's maybe more senior to us, doesn't have that is it's just not true. So they need that feedback just as much as we do. It makes a difference to them just as much as it does to us. So I think there's a bit about remembering that. And but as you rightly said, how we then say things is really important. But what often happens in reality is we hold it back. We don't say it because there is some sort of fear. And do you know what? In my experience, it's often what people fail to say. What they actually regret the most. It's not what they said in a bit of frustration or with a few tears. It's the things that they never ever said, and that's where the regrets.
I remember one thing that I experienced years ago, and you were actually part of it, and I was heavily pregnant at the time. This is good. This isn't bad, but it's just something that has always stayed with me. And I can't remember what the technique is and all of this, but anyway, I was heavily pregnant, and I was on maternity. I think I was literally 9 months pregnant, and I did a little training course with you, and there was a couple of other ladies, and it was locally here in the Midlands. And what you spoke about was, how do we get from the things that you love towards the job that you desire? So rather, that work to live versus live to work. And that, in a way, is kind of how we started this journey. But I feel like you need age and experience to get to that point. So how do you make it not feel like a job? And I just hope that these kind of new cultures and ways of working are encouraging leaders, which I know is what you're doing, to give young people that opportunity and voice now, rather than waiting like me bloody 20 years before I understood what was right and wrong.
I know, wouldn't that be amazing that our kids, I mean, I don't know how old yours are, mine are just about to enter the world of work. Ella's 18, she does done her A-levels, she's going through interviews now for apprenticeships and jobs. Wouldn't it be amazing if if they went into it really knowing what their strengths were. I didn't. It took me years to figure out what I was actually really great at. But it is really important that in order to be valued, to be recognised, to get the kind of fulfilment that we all really want and very often don't have, sadly, in work. But it is about really understanding what our strengths are and then putting ourselves more in places where those strengths can shine.
And maybe that comes back to your interview bit. So if we can get people to understand that early, when you're walking into that interview, you know, maybe asking, can I come and spend a day in your office before I accept an offer?
100%.
And if they shit themselves and go, oh God, no, or yeah, you can, but you can't talk to Bob and Jill, then you can't, your heckles will be up. You go, well, why not? So it's what techniques can we give younger people to get there sooner?
Well, one of the things that I did do some, I must admit, because I'm a coach, I must be a dreadful person to have as a mother, because, you know, I can't help it. But I did do some interview prep with Ella. But one of the things that I did say to her is, you know, ask them some questions about who they are. And use this interview to figure out what you think of them, just as much as they're going to be asking you questions about, you know, about you. And she did do that, and she's very intuitive, Ella. So she kind of she got a feel in the different interviews between the ones that were asking some very scripted questions off a piece of paper, where it felt like, you know, quite rigid. Exactly. Versus the interviewer who just made it feel like they were having a conversation that was actually a really engaging, easy, free, genuinely enjoyable conversation. She came out of that one saying, that's the one I want to work for, you know.
And how powerful would it be if she got the call from the other one to say, you've got the job, and she says, actually, no, thanks.
I think that's what's about to happen, because that has she has been offered that job, and her first instinct was, actually, I don't want to work there. So
that's amazing for her to have that skill, especially now when there are so many people going for jobs and just not getting responses. So kudos to her, fair play.
Yeah, so it is really important, isn't it? And it's having that confidence to trust your intuition as well, to know when because often we know it, don't we? We know when it feels right, we know when it doesn't. And it's only when we override that intuition for too long that actually we can end up getting ourselves into trouble. And that's no one else's fault. No one else is to blame for that. It's just where we've kept on trying to make something work that patently wasn't working. And it's only when you step outside of it and suddenly you go, oh my God, yeah, I feel so different. Well, yeah, there's a reason for that.
And I think it's kind of, some people are better at doing it in the corporate world, their working world, or they're better at doing it in the home. Because I know I say to my girls sometimes, they'll be really shitty and, you know, be really moody and everything, and I'll be the same, and I'll be snapping. And I've kind of come to that point where I realise, you know what, this is our safe zone in this house, and we can do that. Trust me, if I blew up every time that I was dealing with someone in work the way I would do, because you haven't done what I've asked you to do, you've not listened, you haven't been polite or whatever, I'd have been fired or shot. I'm not sure which one. And then you realise, oh my God, that's a self-reflection. I'm not saying what I think at work.
Yeah.
But I'm letting it loose at home. And actually, that's not fair.
No, 100%. And that's usually where we start to build, the triggers start to build, when we know we're not in balance. And it's got nothing to do with the amount of hours you work, or whether you're working from home. I just think that sense of balance is more in our mindset and our state. You know when you've got it, and you know when you haven't.
Yeah. So with a lot of the leaders that you're coaching now, if you were to give the listeners, I don't know, top 3 things that, I don't know if you're saying every organisation should be teal or we should be merging our way, but what sort of things should people be looking for in a great leader, and what should those leaders listening be thinking about themselves, maybe changing?
That's a great and a massive question.
Sorry. Go.
No. I think it's more about, it's really getting to understand what are your values. You know, what are the things you care about? Values are often things that actually we kind of grew up with. Some of them, you know, you'll have been handed down by the people that loved and cared for you, and you've kind of taken those on. Some of them, we just, I think, they become more important as we get to really know ourselves and we get to see what works and what doesn't. But I think really understanding our values is really important. And when those values, when you're with a set of people, and it doesn't matter actually whether we're talking about work or home, but when you're with a set of people that share your values, there's just a sense of groundedness, a sort of a, there's a peace of mind you have with that it's just really enjoyable, and there's an inherent trust there, and it doesn't even have to be spoken. But values are ultimately, you know, show up in our behavior. So I'm not talking about, you know, going to an organization and seeing what they've got on their website and what 5 words they've got and what posters they've got on their walls. I'm talking about, how just that intangible energy, you just feel it. But I think, so get to know your values.
Okay.
I think understanding your own strengths is hugely important. If you've never done any work to really figure out and hone and craft what are the 5 words that define you, the qualities that is, if you were a brand, would be your unique selling point. You know, what would the thing that would, you know, that shines from you? If you've never done that, do that.
Okay.
That might be.
And there's some great online tools, I guess people can just.
There are, yeah. There's it. Actually, in the first book that I wrote, chapter 7 of that book kind of goes into a little bit around your personal brand and understanding your strengths. There's a value strengths exercise that people can do. We can always put the link to that.
Sure.
You know, as we send this out, but really get to know who you are and what you love. And I think that as a basis for being successful, and it's so much more enjoyable putting yourself.
Because it's easy. You're not trying to be somebody else, or, you know, we spoke about fitting in, and it's just, you feel this instant weight lifted. It's like that group of friends that you don't see for years. You rock up and you might talk, you might not, but it's just easy.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's so much more enjoyable than spending all our time fixing weaknesses, which is where the energy often is.
But again,
personal development plans, you know, if they were much more weighted to strengths and how do we leverage strengths than they were to how do we fix these weaknesses, unless those weaknesses are so bad that they're massively, it means your strengths can't shine, then of course you need to do something about it. You know, it's like, it's really getting in your way. If you're getting in your own way, you need to do something about it. And I think linked to that probably, so value, strengths, and then feedback, just practicing feedback. And that's as important to give it, it's important to receive it. So if you don't know what other people really think of you, if you don't know what 5 words people would instantly say, go ask someone else. Go pick up the phone to someone who knows you really well and ask them. But the more we learn to be able to receive that kind of feedback, the easier it gets to kind of say and give it, and not get to the point where you mentioned to earlier, where you're either like in a puddle on the floor because you're so frustrated you can't even speak, or you've got angry and frustrated and it comes out a bit like a.
And actually, you know, just before I started doing the podcasting and I had that whole do I, don't I, it was one of the questions I asked on Facebook, and I just said, right, give me 1 word that describes me. I want good and bad. I'm asking as friends, hit me. And so, and I actually, it was really, really interesting. So I guess to anyone listening, you could do that with the people that know you the best. And I ended up with a list of probably about 15, 20 different words. I remember reposting and going, come on, hit me with the bad. I think you're all being a bit nice. I know what you're really thinking. But it was actually, probably for me at my age, it was more, yeah, okay, I know all of those, but it's a really easy thing to do. And it was actually quite motivating. You know, if you're having a bit of a tough time, just as we all have been recently, it was refreshing to see those words come through. And one word means a lot.
Yeah, it does. It really does. And I bet there were some people though, or there will be a few people that might have said something that surprised you. It might have been who responded, or it might have been what they saw. There's always something to learn, and yeah, absolutely. Make sure there's balance. Don't just mind for the, oh, you know, yeah, what can
Negative.
I do differently? What am I doing wrong? You know, all of that. Mind for both.
It's a bit of our human nature, isn't it? I remember when we get those reports and there'd be the back page that said, here are your, you know, weaknesses or areas of improvement. And they would say to you, don't go to the back page and read that first. What did I do? Straight to the back page. Right, how am I going to stop doing that, and that? But again, that comes with age and experience and going, hold on a minute. If that's 5% of me, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what? That's a really, really good point. So I as part of the writing process, I sent the book to a few people to read in advance and for them to give me some feedback. And every single one of them came back with something which was brilliant and really genuinely helped. But I had a conversation with one of those advanced readers, and and I'd said to her, look, you know, one of the things that's really important to do though, when you do receive feedback, is to remember that you might have a vision for something. And if you take every bit of feedback and then change what it is you're doing, trying to please everybody, you can end up satisfying no one, most importantly yourself. So it's really important to kind of stay really open to what can be learned, but also hold true what is it that's really important to you. And then things then come back where you kind of go, okay, that was their perspective. And actually, like you say, I'm all right with that. That's actually okay, because that's what I want. That's what I intended. It might not be what they want.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
So it's knowing what to let go of when you get feedback too.
Yeah, I think asking for it feels like an easy thing to do. And it's knowing when it hits you and you get some feedback. Most of the time, people want to be kind and respectful of what that feedback is. There's always one or two that are going to go hell for leather on you and just go, well, I think you're this. And I've had it. You're too loud. You're obnoxious. You don't listen properly. You know, you bring the room down when that was one actually, when you're down, everybody knows it. And you bring everybody else down with you. It might only be 5%, but you do. I thought, 5%, guys, come on, you get the energy for 95%. But I spent so long on that 5%.
There you go. And that's where it's kind of really important to know when to let go of stuff. And actually, you're human. You're not going to be perfect, amazing, your very best self 100% of the time. None of us are. No. So if you've got a sense of humility and groundedness, that's the when you get some feedback like that, it's like, it's okay. Well, do you know what? Yeah. I'm happy with the fact that 95% of the time I walk into a room and change energy. That's enough.
Yeah. And so flipping it now for the leaders that you work with, come on, put you on the spot again. What should great leaders really be doing in their day-to-day lives to really impact those, you know, that kind of passionate teams and those cultures of accountability?
What can they do? be really clear on what it is they want.
Yeah.
And be really clear on what it is they want to stand for.
Okay.
So what you want is all about vision. What you stand for is all about purpose. And then the bit that goes on in between is the how, is the strategies and the behaviours that go about creating that success. Very often, we can spend an awful lot of time in meetings figuring out how we do stuff, and the balance of energy gets tipped too much in the how, and we can end up losing sight of why we're doing what we're doing, and is it even the right thing.
Yeah.
So if you're in an organization, or you're leading an organization, or do you know what, even if you're leading your life,
with your family, friends, whatever,
and you're finding that you're just stretched really thin, then that's where the energy needs to go, to your vision and to your purpose.
Okay.
To stop doing, and to know what to stop in the middle.
Oh my God. And that's another topic for another time. That, that whole
yes.
And everyone sitting there in the organization going, holy shit, how are we going to do all of these projects? How are we going to do all these brands and all these projects and services? And that is another minefield of, how you just, if you stuck to that vision, purpose, and a simple way of getting there with a common goal for everyone in their area of expertise. But why is it we end up, the joys of working from home, there's the dog. That's what happens now when the Ring advert comes on the TV. She just goes insane. But I'll just ignore her. But why is it we feel like we just need to do more and more and more? And I guess probably not for a topic now, but you surely experienced that.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's one of the things that, it was just one of the gifts from lockdown, I think. I mean, obviously it's been well documented, but we've all had a chance to stop. We've all had a chance to step back. We've all been spending less time commuting. We've spent probably a bit too much time on Zoom, but a little bit. But, we've learned a lot about what we can stop, and actually which of it we want to choose to re-engage with it, and which of all of that we don't. Had it not been forced on us, there'd be a lot of people still running in that desperate cycle, trying to do it all, trying to run around, dropping kids in the morning, running to work, spending hours on a commute, whether it's in a car or on a train, and all of that has gone. And what's happening now, I think, is interesting, because having gone through that experience, we're now in quite a tough phase where there are a lot of organisations changing shape right now, in order to kind of get match fit, and then figure out, well, what are we going to now do with what we've got left? Where are we now going to push into in order to add value, to remain relevant. And so there's quite a lot of energy now, I think, in an innovation space that's going to be starting to come through. Definitely. Now that there's the shock of it all has come out, and the reality of that is going to be at least another 6 months, maybe even a year, until we're through this. This is now the time for reinvention. So, and the how is now starting to change, I think, but it will be where we now need to reshift where it is we're going, and really being clear on which elements of, and what we care about, our values, our purpose, which elements are really important to stay hold of and stay true to.
And you know what, I think that's probably the perfect wrap up and end, because God forbid I wouldn't wish COVID on anyone, but I do see some amazing life-changing opportunities that will benefit many of us in the long run. So listen, Nic, I could literally talk to you all day. I managed to not cry through that, or maybe I did swear, I don't know, but anyway, I didn't get too angry. But listen, for anyone listening, please take a time out to pick up one of Nic's books. They certainly made me angry and laugh and, you know, a mix of emotions, but I think you summed it up earlier around that. Okay, I can put that in that pocket. That, yeah, I get it now. So feel free, and if anyone's looking for a great exec coach, of course, give Nic a shout. So thank you so much for your time today, Nic. I really appreciate it.
Lovely to see you. Thanks very much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Road and Morale podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.